the presentation. Is that correct?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. And good morning, Vice Chairperson Turner and committee members. Thank you for inviting me to this meeting this morning. My name is Captain Jason Smith. I'm the commander of the Prince George's County Police Department's Automated Enforcement Division. That's a component of the Bureau of Homeland Security Intelligence under Deputy Chief Christian Price. I'm here this morning to brief the committee on the current state of the residential automated speed enforcement program, hopefully to provide some insight into the process by which we make site selections, give you an update on where we are with the program now, and hopefully to answer any questions that you might have about the program. I have a short, very short presentation, and I promise to go through it quickly to not waste your time. Again, that's just the introductory slide. Again, we like to highlight the partnership. The speed enforcement and automated enforcement generally as a public safety program is a partnership between the police department, the Department of Public Works and Transportation. It is a road safety program. Our goal is to make the roadways in the county more safe using a variety of tools. Automated enforcement devices are just one of the several tools available to us. But we do like to highlight that partnership and make sure that the public focus and our focus is on road safety, because that's the ultimate goal of the program. In terms of where we are right now with residential enforcement, as you know, the bill was authorized by the county government last year. As of this year, right now, we've only deployed 2 cameras under the residential enforcement. We still have 72 cameras that are still deployed at the old zones, which were restricted by the prior law to only school zones. But the process of deploying them to the residential locations, there's been a bit of a learning curve for us. But as of right now, we do have 2 new cameras deployed under the residential enforcement law. Those are currently at the 3600 block of Ritchie Marlboro Road and the 4200 block of Ritchie Marlboro Road. And I'm sure we're all familiar. Ritchie Marlboro is one of our top candidate roads for people, cutting through to get to the Beltway or to get to the southern part of the county. It's a throughway road that, the residents on that road definitely don't appreciate the speeds. Those have been live for about 2 months now. We're definitely starting to see some effect. And we're really hoping that in the long term, those show significant reductions in the overall speeds on that road. In addition to the 2 sites we have deployed, we've announced 8 additional enforcement corridors. That announcement was made as part of the Ritchie Marlboro announcement because, again, we wanted to make the game worth the candle. We didn't want to just announce Ritchie Marlboro, even though that was the only site we were at that point prepared to proceed with. We threw some other candidate sites into the announcement to give ourselves some options. The key caveat there being that just because we announced an enforcement corridor, it does not obligate us we're not bound to do enforcement there. But it does give us the option, just because the cycle of making the public announcements has some turnaround to it. So we wanted to put some other candidates up there to allow us to explore actually deploying more cameras. Those 8 additional sites here, you can see 4100 through 4400 Briggs Cheney Road. I was made to understand when I inherited command of the program that particular site was one of the main constituent complaints that was the impetus for the original state legislation to allow us to mimic Montgomery County and do residential speed. So that's the top candidate there, obviously, because I was told there was some real push behind that. The other sites, those are the sites we've announced. We've got quite a variety of locations in Prince George's County that are going to be good candidates. These sites having been announced, though, they're eligible for enforcement as soon as we get the signs deployed. Just to briefly go over the site selection process, the ultimate determination of where a speed enforcement device is placed is the responsibility of the Prince George's County Police Department. But the process by which we identify potential sites, there's several sources through which information or suggestions can come to us. Our main source is our own crash and citation data. Obviously, roadways in the county, we're towing cars up there, we're writing reports, we're writing citations. That gives us a nice data set to kind of understand where the problems on the roadway are. So police crash and citation data is a source. We also identify potential sites through requests from the public, and this is a big one. We get quite a few of these requests. Those include direct requests to the automated enforcement program or to our partner agencies via emails or letters. We get requests routed through elected officials, through community meetings, like, organization, neighborhood meetings, church groups that meet periodically with PGPD executive leadership, and then through the Citizens Advisory Council. We also get site selection recommendations from our partner agencies, which obviously primarily include the Department of Public Works and Transportation and the State Highway Administration. Once we have potential sites, we'll develop these lists. We have quite an extensive list of sites. We try and go through and analyze and prioritize which sites are going to be the best candidates for enforcement. That determination, again, is largely based on crash and citation data and the feedback that we get from the Department of Public Works. Because, again, we need to be able to support the deployment of the camera to say, like, the volume of traffic and the nature of the driving behaviors demonstrated by drivers on the roadways not just justify automated enforcement, but indicate that automated enforcement is going to be an effective tool to increase road safety. Obviously, automated enforcement devices are only one of a broad toolkit available to DPW&T to make roadways safer. But we want to make sure that speed enforcement makes sense in the context of the particular site we're analyzing. So we consult our own data sets for crash and citation data, and then we consult with DPW&T. Among the things we get DPW&T to give us feedback on is, obviously, can a device be safely installed? Does the roadway facilitate? Is there enough curtilage on the roadway? Can we put a device up there without blocking a critical sight line? Things like that. Also, DPW&T gives us feedback of other mitigation strategies like signage, re-engineering, or other traffic calming devices would be more effective, or would be more effective when deployed in concert with a speed device. Some of the other support that DPW&T provides us throughout the stage, but mainly at the site selection verification stage and the pre-deployment stage. Their traffic division staff evaluate the roadway, again, looking for stuff like the classification roadway and prevailing average daily traffic volume. Again, that's to say, is the game worth the candle there? Are there enough cars on that roadway to make a speed enforcement device effective? The prevailing speed, which they, conduct a radar speed study. And again, these specifics, this isn't outside of my area of expertise. I'm sure DPW&T has experts that can speak in more detail. But these are the types of things that they'll give us feedback on. Studies that will indicate the prevailing speed, like, how fast people are going, what the most egregious speeds we see are. Their data to contribute to our crash history. Timelines, they can do traffic studies for us. They also, obviously, they install and maintain the signs that are required by the law. Once we establish an enforcement corridor, it has to be signed, obviously, to indicate to the public, and DPW&T is obviously critical in that part of it. Once we've selected a site, we submit the approval process internally here in the department. We prepare a packet here in automated enforcement that goes up to the chief's office. The chief obviously reviews it, the data that we provide, the feedback from DPW&T, and then gives us a yay or nay on whether the site is approved by him. If his office approves it, we prepare the site for enforcement. That preparation includes publishing a notice in a local newspaper as required by the law. This public notice informs the public that a new corridor is being established. We interface with DPW&T to ensure that the required signs are placed, and that we have, we get their feedback on specific placement of the camera to make sure it's installed somewhere safe. And then the contractor, the vendor that provides these devices, works to obtain whatever permits may be required, and then installs and calibrates the device. Once the device is up and running, there is a mandatory, under the law, 30 calendar day period during which the device can only issue warnings. And so after that 30-day period goes, we start actively enforcing and issuing citations. And then just some final notes about that. I touched on this a bit earlier. Just because we establish an enforcement zone or a corridor does not mean that we're obligated to deploy a device. Using Montgomery County's program as an example, they have hundreds of corridors, but they only are actively enforcing in a relatively small percentage of those, 50 to 70. It's likely our program will mimic that in the long term. That's our ultimate goal, in my opinion, should be that every roadway that qualifies under the law should eventually be established as an enforceable zone. And then our camera inventory, how many devices that we're deploying, we'll determine that number based on the health of the program. It's not a number that we're going to, because again, we don't know now how many cameras we can sustain. But we are not limited in, like, we don't have to enforce in a zone just because we've announced it. It just, once we've announced it, established it as a zone, and installed the required signage, it just becomes an option. Luckily, the technology that we use through the vendor is mobile, so we have that ability to move cameras into and out of zones which we do. As driver behavior starts to show an impact, we'll move the camera somewhere else and have it impact that road, and it gives us that flexibility. So yeah, in the long term, it's very likely we're going to have many, many more enforceable zones than we have active devices. So that's my presentation. Hopefully I didn't waste any of your time there, and I'm happy to take any questions. Hopefully I can get you answers or point you in the right direction.
Definitely. Thank you, Captain Smith, for a very thorough presentation. Why don't we go first to Director Johnson, if you had any additional comments. And then I know we've been joined by DCAO Holt as well, so allow him an opportunity to say any comments as well as for the program. Good morning, Director Johnson.
Good morning, Vice Chair Turner and committee members. I didn't really have anything additional to that. I think Captain Smith did a very thorough job in covering DPWT's role. As mentioned, we do provide the support role. We would take a look and make sure that it is in compliance with the prevailing standards and road safety standards. And once it is, we would then install the signs and maintain those signs. But it's largely Prince George's County Police initiative that we are, glad to play a support role.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I appreciate that. I'm sure there may be a couple of questions, so just stay with us. And then let me turn to DCA Holt, if you had any additional comments before I turn to my colleagues for questions. Good morning, Mr. Holt.
Good morning. Happy to be here with you all to just comment briefly on the program. As you know, we began this program as a program for school zones and construction sites. And our experience with these cameras in school zones certainly demonstrated that they are an effective tool. And that's what led to the expansion into the residential areas, where we use them as appropriate to have a similar benefit. But I'd like to point out that speed cameras are not the only solution, and they're not appropriate in all residential areas. We have other tools in our toolkit that we can employ before we automatically jump to a camera. We have a model that we use called the Neighborhood Traffic Management Program, where we look at, as Captain Smith said, we look at speeding, we look at traffic volumes. We employ kind of a point system and look at other calming devices that we have in residential neighborhoods that we can use. Sometimes we use passive solutions like education. We use special pavement markings. Other times we use physical measures like maybe speed humps or chokers or islands or roundabouts. Sometimes before we go to a speed camera. But all of this is kind of based on an analysis of what makes the most sense for the circumstances that we find ourselves in, where we look at traffic volumes. We look at how fast is the traffic going over the posted speed limit, because we have a threshold on our cameras, as you perhaps know, at 12 miles over the posted speed. So in a 35-mile zone, we would look at 47 as a threshold. So those are some of the kinds of analysis that we engage when we're trying to determine, does a speed camera make sense, or is it the right issue? We look at, of course, pedestrian traffic and vehicular volumes, crash histories, and all those kinds of conditions. So I appreciate the work that Captain Smith does and that our public works traffic management people do prior to deciding that we're going to do a speed camera, because they are safety devices, not income devices. And we don't want to contravene the program by over deploying. We want to deploy them where they are appropriate and where they're necessary. And so we'll answer any questions you have about the program and how we deploy them, where we deploy them, and what the totality of circumstances are.
Thank you very much for those good comments, Director DCAO Holt. Let me now turn to my colleagues for questions. I saw Councilmember Denoga followed by Councilmember Glaris.
Thank you. And thanks to the departments for their work on this. Glad to see it moving forward. Really appreciate the work. A couple questions. Back in March, we got a letter with a list of sites. Now, I understand the slides here. So we've got 2 that have been implemented, 8 that have been announced. So I assume that something will be coming in the near future. Number one, what happened? What's the status of the other items, other locations on that letter, March 1st? And are there other locations that have met the public notification requirements that you're not announcing, or do they still need to go through that process? In other words, are there more than the existing ones plus these 10 that are ready to go if you chose, or do they still need to go through the public process? You're holding them back.
Thanks, sir. And if I can answer that, again, we've put out several lists of this, and part of the confusion here is that there are 2 programs we're trying to implement at the same time. One is the residential speed, and another that you may be familiar with is enhanced red light or speed on green. And we've published several locations that meet both of the qualifications. So I guess I'm saying there's lists that have been flying around all over the place. I don't know for what specific list you're referring to in March, but I will say generally, other than the 9 sites, the Ritchie Marlboro location and those other 8 that were in that Washington Post announcement, any other candidate sites, and we do have quite a few, would still need to be announced in a public newspaper before we could enforce them. But our list of potential sites is extremely long. So the only reason that the 9 that we announced along with Ritchie Marlboro, we kind of just grabbed a handful because the Ritchie Marlboro issue was coming to a head. We had to get those cameras out. And so we selected at random a couple of our candidate sites. We tried to spread them out throughout the county just to throw on the announcement to give us some options, because we were under we were under some time pressure for the Ritchie Marlboro cameras. But we do have I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I understand. And you don't need to justify what you did. I support what you did. I'm not questioning that. I'm just trying to figure out the status. So this March 1st letter was from the county executive. I'm sure you've got 1,000 letters. You can't keep track, but you're CC'd on it, as is the department heads and everybody. And I'm guessing it's like 15 to 20 streets. This was listed. These are listed as the first phase residential locations. And I'm just clarifying. So obviously not all of them are being done at once, but because they have to go through a certain process, I was trying to figure out which roads of all your lists, including this list, are where in the process. It'd be nice if there was a spreadsheet that said, here's the 150 possible, here's the 100 that we're working on, and here's the 30 that have been qualified. Because one of the things that I understand you're going to do, you and DPWT, which I agree with, is have a roster of places that you can move temporary locations around. And I think it's good for the council members to know and to tell our constituents, hey, this is the list in our district that you may see a camera. So just, I don't need an answer today. I'm just trying to figure out which roads are in which level of approval or activation. And that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yes, sir. I would say that other than the 9 that we've announced, the rest are right before the stage of public announcement, meaning we would want to, I would take that list, submit it to DPW&T for their feedback for concerns over, like, obviously the viability of the camera. If they came back and said, yes, these are viable sites, we would then announce them publicly, and that's the status of those other 15. So yeah, I would say that right now we have cameras in 2 or locations in 2 status. They're the ones that have been announced and the ones that haven't been. But no, I definitely will take that. It should be very possible for us to put together a spreadsheet that we update for the kind of lists what locations we're considering and what stage in the process they're at. That's absolutely something we'll do.
Yeah, 2 thoughts on that. Number one, the broadest level of list might be everything that somebody has mentioned to you as what they'd like to see, whether it's you folks, DPW, citizens, the broadest list of where concerns have been raised, because that would inform the council if we're not hearing it from our constituents, what's on the broadest request level. The other thing is you move forward to providing a recommended list to DPWT. I would hope there's no reason not to let the council be CC'd on that, so that if we have any comments, I mean, my guess is we're going to agree with you on just about everything. That's my guess. But it would be nice to know in advance before something goes from under consideration to being announced that, we're aware that it's coming. And that's all I had, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Denoga. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
And then I think Ms. Claros, you were next. Okay, just want to make sure my system was slowing down, so everybody froze for a little bit. Ms. Claros, go ahead.
Not a problem. I had the same challenge yesterday at my house quite a bit with PHED. So thank you for the presentation. Really excited to see this program up and running. And I appreciate Councilmember Denoga's comments. I just want to go back to something I raised actually when this was last presented to the council. And I think it's probably helpful to reiterate it just because now we have our acting director with us. Great to see you, actually, Acting Director Johnson. So I am concerned about process for how streets are evaluated, right? So the question I raised when this was in front of the council last time was why Princess Garden Parkway wasn't on this list of consideration. And the response back was, we didn't know anything about it. And I say it that way because actually there's been numerous communication from my office and from the community with concerns about safety on Princess Garden Parkway. The beautiful part is DPW&T paved a potholed road. The bad news is now everyone drives a lot faster on that road. And we have pedestrian crossings in several parts, and there's been accidents along that roadway. So I really, really, really can't stress enough that I think there really needs to be a clear one-point entry into this process. There needs to be something on DPW&T's website or something where a person can, in essence, request that their street be added to consideration for the residential street program. It shouldn't just rely on, calls coming in various ways. I really think there just needs to be one entry point for the process, and one that it's really easy for us as council members or the county executive or the agency to also share with our civic leaders and civic associations so they know as well, and that we're guaranteed that those are then evaluated and included. Because otherwise I worry that the process right now is not as clear as it really needs to be. And I think the public is going to be is already very interested in this program, is going to continue to be very interested in the program, which I think is also why Councilmember Denoga mentioned his thoughts as well. So I hope that's possible to do. It's more of a recommendation, less of a question, but excited to see us moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then if there's a response, please, I'd love to hear it, but it was just more a request than anything.
Good. Mr. Johnson.
Yes. Good morning, Councilwoman. The Citizen Advisory Committee is the mechanism that would allow an organized way for requests to be vetted, and if they pass muster, to be included in the program. And the way that the committee is constructed, there will be 2 citizen representatives from each council district, 2 from each at-large council member, and 3 from the office of the county executive, giving a total of 25 members. That committee's charge would be to do exactly what you are requesting, to funnel requests through to the police department and through them to us, to DPWT, for evaluation and possible sign off for, locations where cameras can be installed, residential cameras.
And so I'm just going to be really forthright and say that I do not think that's an acceptable process. And Mr. Turner, Chair Turner's nodding his head. So 1, I did submit names of citizens to be considered for that board. I have no idea if they've ever been contacted, nor if it's up and running. No one's ever communicated back with me, number 1. Number 2, most residents do not know that. I mean, honestly, I just don't understand why this is that complicated. All you need to do is either in the 311 drop-in menu, which actually might be the simplest way, by the way, to do this, is request for residential street cameras. And it's a drop-down thing, and people can easily request it that way. There's a few other options, right? Like on a website and so forth. But if you all are going to rely on the Citizen Advisory Commission to be funneling the requests, that is also just not going to ensure that requests are managed in a coherent way. So I'm just going to push back on it. I just don't think that's going to get to where we need to be. And for residents to be satisfied with that. And once again, I still don't know where we are with that CAC committee, and we sent names a while back. So I'm not even sure I remember who I sent to you, by the way, 6 months ago. So.
It's sort of in the stage ready to launch, and we were waiting for names. I wasn't aware that names had been submitted, so
Yes, those were requested the last time you were in front of us. We were told that we needed to submit them. I have submitted them. We haven't heard anything back since. So maybe we'll go back to Councilmember Dernoga's point and say communication is really, really essential. Thank you.
Well, I will look into that and sort of.
I have the names, Mr. Johnson. She submitted them to me.
I see. Okay.
Did I submit names? It's been so long, I don't remember either.
Thank you, Ms. Claros.
Councilmember Claros, we also hear the underlying issue too, is that it doesn't have to be overly complicated, and it doesn't have to be the squeaky wheel method either. We'll take another look at that and see if we can demystify the process for getting a request into the system.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Claros. I'm not sure if, I know Ms. Taveras was in transit, so hopefully she'll join us. I'm not sure if she has any questions. Just a couple, I'll just reaffirm some of the points. Obviously, Councilmember Dernoga said if we can get a listing as we did back in the March meeting of those sites. Obviously, there might have been more sites that have come in based on feedback, community or otherwise. That would be helpful for us, and that will, I hate to say it, will trigger us as well as we receive complaints to make sure we get them into the process as we receive them. I do agree with Ms. Claros about making this simple for people, whether it's through 311, through either the police department's website or the Department of Public Works and Transportation's website, to say if you have a request for us to evaluate a street for the program. That I think it's simple. I'll give you one example. I know I was contacted generally about speeding issue in a neighborhood, and I know obviously we have the traffic management process, and having gone through that both at the municipal level, which I know my jurisdiction adopted the county's program, that you do, as Mr. Holt said, you do have these stages that you have to go through in order to get to potentially getting a speed camera. Obviously that qualifies under the both the county code and state law. I tried to look for that online, and unfortunately, I was not able to find it on the Department of Public Works and Transportation. And I know it may be part of the Vision Zero now process, but that was a simple, here's what you need to do. Here are the steps in the process. It might include doing education. I know we expanded the number of E's, if I remember correctly, under Vision Zero from about 3 when I started out. I think we're at 6 or 8 or something now, as part of our traffic education and enforcement efforts here in the county. So just a note too, if that's available, that's another way of educating the public as to steps in the process. I don't know if that's been updated, with the speed camera program, whether on the school side or the residential side. I think that would be useful as well to our residents as we're moving forward with Vision Zero as well. So Captain Smith, let me just recap. So right now, we have 9 locations, one of which has 2 cameras. So I guess technically on Marlboro Ritchie Road, the other 8 that were announced, are those, have signs already been erected, or they're in the process of being erected?
No, I have not requested DBW&T prepare those sites with signs yet, but they are announced and they are enforceable. So the only thing holding us back is signs installed, and then we'd be good.
Okay. And I guess it's more of it gets back to your issue about having more enforcement corridors or sites similar to Montgomery County, and then having rotation of the cameras themselves based on facts and circumstances. Was there an expectation that there would be a regular rotation for at least in the beginning with these initial sites, that there would be a regular rotation of the mobile cameras?
In terms of we didn't plan to have a rigid window in which right now our rotation tends to be based on what we call the camera has to self-sustain. We don't like bringing revenue into the conversation about this, but obviously, as caretakers of taxpayer dollars, we're obligated to make sure that the program itself can sustain itself. So our baseline threshold for rotation is when a camera no longer can generate enough funds to sustain its own costs. But that doesn't stop us from looking at, and again, this is something we'll likely develop over time, because the residential program is it's the most significant change in automated enforcement that's ever been. It's likely that we will need to develop, or find it useful to develop in the future, a rotation schedule that may, based on other factors, but right now we only rotate based on sustainability.
Okay. Yeah, something obviously as we grow, literally we're within the first year of this program, so I know there's going to be lessons learned. Obviously, we have other jurisdictions that may be a little bit more advanced, both in the District of Columbia and Montgomery County. So obviously, I appreciate that. I think the concern is, even though there are other enforcement tools other than the speed cameras, by announcing these sites, there's going to be an expectation of our communities that there will be cameras there. So I know it acts as a deterrent, particularly if you get the signage up, and they know over a period of time that there might be a camera there. So hopefully we can get to a point where we're able to do that. And then so my last question is on, not so much on the operational side as well. Obviously, we knew there might be a cost associated with the purchase of additional cameras. Just your thought process, obviously, as we're just starting out, in preparation, I guess, for next year's fiscal budget. If we're looking to expand the number of sites, what does that mean with respect to the purchase of the equipment, the operational issues with the vendor as part of that process as well? Didn't know if you had any thoughts, Director Holt. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're actually optimistic that the vendor, our contract with the vendor is compensated per device deployed. So they have a built-in incentive in the contract to give us as many cameras as we can handle. We're optimistic that the benefits of the residential program will expand the number of enforcement sites to the point where we will not only be able to increase our inventory of cameras, but significantly without having to allocate fund. We should be able to generate sufficient revenue to more than pay for any additional cameras we need to do enforcement. Even though COVID kind of affected our numbers, the camera rotation stagnated, people weren't on the road, the citation numbers were down, the program still sustained its costs. And we think that in terms of the availability of enforcement locations provided by residential, we're optimistic that we will be able to get more cameras from the vendor without any additional costs to the county or to the taxpayer. The hope being that the program becomes more cost efficient as we expand. We think that's the direction it's going to go.
No, I appreciate that, and I believe we have representatives of the Revenue Authority on actually to assist the police department with respect to the actual program itself. Assuming they still have that responsibility under the residential as they did under the school zone one as well, right?
They do, and they're critical. The Revenue Authority, they were key in getting me up to speed on this. They're an essential partner. We're very grateful for their help. But yeah, they're still on board and still helping us with that.
Okay. Ms. Taveras, I see you've joined us. I don't know if you had any questions, or all other council members have had an opportunity.
Yes, thank you. I have to agree with Ms. Glaros in the sense that I don't think that funneling this through our constituents is the best course of action to proceed. I also take I'm a little bit concerned. I think we should rename the program Community Advisory Committee, just because I think we need to be open. I don't want us to exclude anyone. I want us to be inclusive. In terms of this is just to clarify, I just want to make sure we're just talking at this point of roadways that are maintained and managed by the State Highway Administration, correct? DCA, or are we also including the streets, the community neighborhoods?
Yeah, this is the county residential program. So this.
Okay. No. I wanted to just double check and make sure, because I remember that we were doing both, but I'm not sure if this particular conversation was just on the numbered roadways. Because I do agree that we do need to look outside the box for other speed calming mechanisms in particular roadways that are serving as a cut through. For example, it's been really difficult to get DPWT to implement tumblers and speed humps in areas like Carroll Highland, down Erskine, Drexel, looking at particular other areas of 23rd, 24th Place, 24th Avenue, where people are basically just racing down these streets, and we know that that particularly in my district, we have some of the highest crash and death rates in the whole, not only in the whole county or the whole state, in the whole region, as you very well know. And so I just feel real sensitive about making sure that we're including those neighborhood roadways as well. And I did not see those listed in the original list that was proposed. And welcome, Director Johnson. Look forward to being able to work with you. I'm sure this is hitting you the ground running. So look forward to meeting with you and having conversations. We have a lot to discuss over the next 2 to 3 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Taveras. I don't see any other comments or questions from my colleagues. Mr. Battle?
I just want to add one point, Mr. Chair, and especially in reference to the concerns that have been raised about the ability for residents to, make their concerns known about potential locations. At the staff level, I know we talked a lot about website presence and trying to come up with a model that's similar to the way Montgomery does it, and a place where citizens could go on the website and find it. It's similar to what Mr. Turner, you indicated you had tried to do, and that we will try to have a website presence where it was easy for people to get to that location. So I know that's being at least considered, and I was hoping it would come up in the conversation. So definitely, it has been raised that should be part of the overall, so that we have more ways for citizens to interact besides beyond the citizens advisory group and all that. So I just wanted to bring that up. I know it has been discussed, and hopefully that will become one of the things that citizens can avail themselves of. So
Thank you, Mr. Battle. The one thing I think Mr. Williams had joined us. I don't know if he's listening. One of the things that we might want to do is just to remind our colleagues, if it seems like some have submitted names, maybe some others have not yet, with respect to the whatever we're calling it, Citizen Community Advisory Committee for this particular program. So we can have that representation at least as they evaluate. I know it's something that we discussed when the legislation was before us last year, whether that was going to function in the way that we thought, but we thought it was important to have a community impact or opportunity anyway through that committee. 25 sounds like a lot, to be honest with you, but that's something that I guess we can reconsider, or the next council can reconsider if it's working the way we thought it was. So, okay. Again, thank you, Director Johnson. Thank you, Captain Smith. Appreciate your work. Thank you, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer Holt. We'll continue to follow up. We'll do some follow up on some of the requests that came out of our briefing today. So, all right. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you all. Good day.